Welcome to the Two Boots Word Vault podcast. In this episode, I give you the essay which I presented at the 40th Minnesota Men's Conference in October of 2024. Personal happiness is our goal as human beings. To arrive there, we intuitively seek balance, beauty, and harmony. Each of us seeks it from our individual level or our individual type of awareness. Carl Jung said we have 4 functions of consciousness or types of awareness: intuition, feeling, sensation, and thinking. In 1982, the educator Howard Gardner wrote that we have 8 types of intelligence. They could be called body smart, people smart, word smart, logic smart, nature smart, self smart, visual smart, or musical smart. Later, he set them into 3 overarching possibilities: naturalistic intelligence, spiritual intelligence, and existential intelligence. No matter how you divide awareness into categories, they are connected to the one mystery. As James Hillman said here decades ago, attention is the first virtue. For me, attention is more than a virtue. It is a type of awareness. Hugh Brockwell Ripman, a student of P.D. Ouspensky and Gurdjieff and sadhus and Sufis around the world, said, "At the core of our being is the silent witness." I take that to be silent awareness. The sunflower's simple awareness turns its face to the sun. The garter snake's awareness sends it into its earthen hole when the winter comes. Even the sacred trickster is trying, through his antics, to return himself and the world to a wider sense of balance. I also believe that balance, beauty, and harmony are available to everyone through effort and curiosity, if and when we learn to pay attention to the various levels of awareness in ourselves and the various levels outside of us in the universe. Here's a poem from the poet Ibn al-Arabi, the great Islamic master of the 13th century. To us, the mineral is the lowest form of creation, but really, it's the highest. It has no eyes, no ears, neither nostril nor skin, and not our idea of a mind. All it does is call to God and glorify God with its original silent nature. We must be careful, because we often get trapped and tangled up at one level of awareness and then disparage other types. When the cerebral purist disparages the carpenter, the jock disparages the bookworm. The clever one disparages the truth seeker. Often, we disparage our own levels of ability in the same way, and the taboos and sins described by our so-called experts send us into shame and dark feelings. The great spiritual traditions of the world attempt to offer us answers. In all of our senses, inner and outer, there is a desire to connect to the harmonious flow of energy in our lives and to the flow of other beings, and ultimately to the expansive personal unknown. That flow seeks balance, the way water seeks its own level. Harmony occurs when we are aware of how the various levels of consciousness connect in us. The difficulties we face up to are but a part of our attempt at harmony. In most of the spiritual traditions, The elites and specialists hold the secrets. And we are often asked to give up our own experience and trust their knowledge. They may be helpful, like a map or a guide. But let's remember Alfred Korzybski's quote, "Don't mistake the map for the territory." If we make that mistake, we find ourselves in someone else's territory and on their path. The best guide wants you to experience the sacred territory and does not want to block your path. When my mother died, the chaplain at the facility where she spent her last week said to me, "Everyone I have dealt with here had their own path through the forest of dying." I want to paraphrase that. Everyone has his own path through the forest of living also. We all seek harmony from a particular level of awareness. Whether one is an ascetic, living alone in the desert seeking God, a stay-at-home parent, an amateur basketball player, or a microbiologist in the International Space Station, there is always a path to harmony through the specific activity and knowledge if those experiences align with your various types of awareness. It is up to you to follow your particular path. I was raised Roman Catholic, and I took its belief system seriously until I asked why the church opposed contraception. I was the oldest of 11 children at the time, 17 years old, and my mother had suffered 2 miscarriages in the 2 previous years. The Monsignor simply answered, "Because we say so." His negative response set me on my own path, and I'm grateful for his answer. I knew I had to trust my own mind's choices. For me, maturity was learning to connect my cerebral awareness with the other types of various awareness, my physical senses, and the unseen levels inside of me. From the simplest attention to the complex cerebral activities, we learn to connect with the world around us and the unseen beyond. At each step, we seek balance, beauty, and harmony on a widening and deepening scale. If we ignore the differences between the levels and the modes of awareness and depend only upon one type of awareness, we get trapped, and our soul's various levels are in disharmony, ugliness, and imbalance. As I began college, my working class father worried that I would lose my faith, as so many of his peers did when they were exposed to new beliefs and experiences. Little did he know that eventually he, too, would question his beliefs and the authorities from whom he sought guidance. Even experts become trapped by their cerebral explanations, and we must continue to question their expertise when our experience is different from theirs. At the university, I began to question, sometimes aloud, sometimes silently, the teachings I was given. I specifically recall a Shakespeare class where the professor focused on a Shakespearean dilemma of mixed emotions. I told him that I didn't believe in the binary he offered, and he was only somewhat accurate. From my own experience and conversations with my father, the feeling expressed in the play was its own specific emotion, not 2 conflicting emotions. The protagonists and the professor's intellect struggled to grasp the new emotional experiences with old habits, and he was trapped in the binary mind. The professor's ego tried to constrict and dissect the feeling into a binary of 2 labeled emotions. The intellectual sense got in the way of the larger bodily life flow. Shakespeare understood, whether intuitively or intellectually, that the protagonist's discomfort was a unique emotion, the bodily expression of movement through the forest of the dilemma. Our emotions, like our bodies, need struggles in which to grow and be strong. Whether in tragedy or comedy, movement is the living thread. Here I want to quote words given me by Martin Prechtel, which he said came from an old cowboy in New Mexico. Quote, "If you want a strong horse, pasture him on a hill," unquote. All the horse's muscles strengthen as the horse grazes in different positions. Emotional hillsides offer the same strengthening process. I always like to find poems that support my thoughts. So here's a poem by William Stafford, written August 2nd, 1993, 3 weeks before he died. The way it is. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and when you suffer and get old, nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. What if that thread is a braid of multiple awarenesses, or an underground river? A more appropriate metaphor may appeal to you. As I studied literature, I kept returning to the poets for insight, and I wondered at which level of awareness they were writing. They all had a different preference. By the time I went to graduate school, I found that poetry was a path that aided my access through the wild forest of my living. I delved into my own mind, my body, my experiences and relationships. I dug into the worlds around me, the political, the natural, interpersonal worlds, and the unseen. By studying poetry and writing poetry, and relying on what the great poets wrote, I used poetry, my own and others, as my spiritual practice, the way theologians use their sacred texts. In a seminar on the prose poem in America, I was introduced to Robert Bly and Juan Ramon Jimenez, the 1956 Nobel Prize winner for literature and an exile from the Spanish Civil War. At that time, I felt closer to Jimenez's work than to Bly's work. In his prose poems, Jimenez wrote intimately and beautifully about all types of people, especially in his book, Platero y Yo, short prose poems on his life with his donkey, Platero, and the relationships they developed with all the people in his town of Moguer. These poems led me to his essays, and that is the next jumping off place for this presentation. I would like to read passages from 2 essays presented in 1941 at the University of Miami. In one essay, entitled Poetry and Literature, he distinguishes the difference between poetry and literature. As a graduate student in journalism, this essay further affirmed my choices toward the poetic path. Quote, "Literature, however perfect it may be, is always artificial. The more artificial, the more perfect. Through literature, it is possible to arrive at a relative beauty, but poetry is far beyond relative beauty. and its expression aspires to absolute beauty, unquote. Isn't that also the aim of religious and spiritual traditions? Isn't there something beyond the relative beauty found by our physical senses and inner awareness? When I read these essays, I found affirmation for my own youthful beliefs. I would like to spend some time reading quotes from the 1941 essay by Jimenez entitled Aristocracy and Democracy. Both words come from the Greek. Aristo means the best or excellent. Demos means the people. Kratia means power or rule. Therefore, aristocrat means the best ruler or the excellent power. Democrat means the people's rule or the people's power. Jimenez writes, quote, "The most aristocratic man will then be he whose spirit needs least from the outside, without discounting what is necessary, and also does not long for the superfluous." Another one, quote, "I believe that in order to be aristocratic, all men, all peoples, all countries have to live united with their natural environment, with nature in general, for in it indeed we encounter daily symbols and signs which we then have to interpret in terms of the complete social life. Nothing contributes a better tempering, a more exact sense of propriety. Nothing absorbs and annuls the petty like nature, and nature raises us to greatness." Another quote, "The man who is conscious of his being and his existence displays his aristocracy by not disguising himself from the people, by never lacking respect for his people, whom he must help properly in these or other matters. Man should appear everywhere as he is, as his culture and cultivation have made him, without concessions to his environment or to the fashion when such concessions do not derive from his own convictions." On his first visit to America in 1916, Jimenez visited Walt Whitman's New York home because he loved Whitman's poetry and thoughts. And he saw Whitman as an exemplar of the aristocratic man. Why not? He knew Whitman's basic belief. Whitman wrote this in the preface to Leaves of Grass. "This is what you shall do. Love the earth, the sun, and the animals. Despise riches. Give alms to everyone that asks. Stand up for the stupid and crazy. Devote your income and labor to others. Hate tyrants. Argue not concerning God. Have patience and indulgence toward the people. Take off your hat to nothing known or unknown, or to any man or number of men. Go freely with powerful, uneducated persons, and with the young, and with the mothers of families. Read these leaves in the open air every season of every year of your life. Re-examine all you have been told at school or church or in any book. Dismiss whatever insults your own soul. And your very flesh shall be a great poem, and have the richest fluency, not only in its words, but in the silent lines of its lips and face, and between the lashes of your eyes, and in every motion and joint of your body." Here's Jimenez again, He, the aristocrat, needs no rewards either in this or in the other world. No rewards that are not within the self, in his society, in his solitude. He is a free aristocrat, profoundly in love with this life in which he must find everything, and he does not believe he has to transcend it anywhere else. His unique reward is his good and beautiful life. A mountain, a hand, a star. His reward is his peaceful death. Peaceful death, another superior concept, superior in its beautiful and sufficient eternity. Amazing words by Jimenez. Here's another quote. There is no more exquisite form of aristocracy than living out of doors. When a man can live tranquilly out of doors without fear of anyone or anything on earth or in space, and not because he is a savage, but because he is thoroughly civilized. He has arrived through himself at the ultimate, that is to say, the primal, having rid himself of all that is useless and unserviceable. Yes, this return to the primal is the ultimate, to which a man can attain while he is alive. It can make him complete, master of God and himself, absolute friend to others, a poet without needing to write, without an academy. Unquote. To me, his use of the term primal is his way of naming that life flow. This is not a sentimental concept for Jimenez. It is the result of a moral and noble existence. He takes us further toward the connection with the earth and the network of life. He reminded me of the words of his countryman, the philosopher José Ortega y Gasset. Yo soy yo y mis circunstancias. I am I and my surroundings. You know, if these statements are true, a man's nobility is not based on his physical attributes, his bloodline, his wealth, or worldly success. His aristocracy is a result of his inner sensibilities influencing his behavior in the outer world. Any serious craftsman, say a boat builder, a mason, or a blacksmith, works towards balance, beauty, and harmony, and therefore toward the aristocracy of his own soul. Any chosen way of life, being an attentive father, a good uncle, or a neighbor, can ennoble a man into his own aristocratic soul. Our materialism and our digital age's addiction to instant gratification does not honor such aristocracy. TV ads may give lip service, but they also deride the man working outside of the elitist path of the binary winner-loser continuum. Today, a man is a failure if he doesn't pursue materialism or some sort of political or commercial dominance as demanded by the specialist or those elites who are, quote, influencers. Here's a quote that's over 40 years old and summarizes our current cultural mindset. Here's an early influencer, a radio personality, Paul Harvey, and this is his statement against the common man. Why should anyone aspire to be a common man, an average man? Do you realize what it means to be average? That means you're the best of the lousiest and the lousiest of the best. Now, if we demand more and more for producing less and less, while the have-not nations encourage and inspire, and indeed require hard work and maximum effort. If we deify the common man, while they encourage and reward the uncommon ones, well, the end result of such a lopsided race as that is too obvious to require elaborations. Unquote. The goals of this hierarchical belief system exist only in the consumer's outer world, and its true believers disparage all others. This is contrary to Whitman. Such a man is not an aristocrat, according to Jimenez. This belief system pushes people into unfair competitions and an addiction to immediate gratification, which grows logarithmically in our digital culture. It also creates cultural amnesia. We know that someone who learns delayed gratification, like the conscientious stay-at-home father, has a happier, more satisfying life and experiences an emotionally resilient existence. Let's look at the craftsman, the artisan. The true craftsman is not only interested in perfecting the process of his craft, but more importantly, finding and knowing where his work is in harmony with the wider world. Let's say he wants to connect with the verb, God. Not the noun God, but the ever-moving, everlasting source of existence. Or, as the ancient Chinese call it, the Tao. When one understands the connections to the Tao in the various levels of awareness, vitality itself provides balance, beauty, and harmony. I want to read this poem by Chuang Tzu, translated by Thomas Merton. It's entitled, Cutting Up an Ox. Prince Wenwei's cook was cutting up an ox. Out went a hand, down went a shoulder. He planted a foot, he pressed with a knee. The ox fell apart with a whisper. The bright cleaver murmured like a gentle wind, rhythm, timing, like a sacred dance, like the mulberry grove, like ancient harmonies. Good work, the prince exclaimed. Your method is faultless. Method, said the cook, laying aside his cleaver. What I follow is Tao, beyond all methods. When I first began to cut up oxen, I would see before me the whole ox, all in one mass. After 3 years, I no longer saw this mass. I saw the distinctions. But now, I see nothing with my eye. My whole being apprehends. My senses are idle. The spirit, free to work without plan, follows its own instinct. Guided by natural line, by the secret opening, the hidden space, my cleaver finds its own way. I cut through no joint, chop no bone. A good cook needs a new chopper once a year. He cuts. A poor cook needs a new one every month. He hacks. I've used the same cleaver 19 years. It has cut up 1,000 oxen. Its edge is as keen as if newly sharpened. There are spaces in the joints. The blade is thin and keen. When this thinness finds a space, there is all the room you need. Hence, I have this cleaver 19 years as if newly sharpened. True, there are sometimes tough joints. I feel them coming. I slow down. I watch carefully, hold back, barely move the blade, and whoomp, the part falls away, landing like a clod of earth. Then I withdraw the blade. I stand still and let the joy of the work sink in. I clean the blade and put it away. Prince Wenhui said, "This is it. My cook has shown me how I ought to live my life." My father was a meat cutter and a gardener. When he retired, his peers told me that he was the best meat cutter in their local union. He used his many senses, inner and outer, and his many intelligences. And he had a peaceful death. The academic distinctions of Carl Jung and Howard Gardner are merely categories in the flow of soul intelligence. Any knowledge or label of those categories was not necessary to my father's life. He found his own categories. At the end of his life, he had joy and satisfaction, and he knew that his participation in the wider world added something beautiful and harmonious to his people and his own life. That was the mark of his nobility, his aristocracy. Of course, we had our moments of friction, our occasionally emotionally raw conflicts, but not in the last decades of his life. I want to quote Lao Tzu from the Tao Te Ching, one of the first non-textbooks I bought as a young adult. Then I'll read a poem from my dad. Number 54, translated by Jia Fufeng and Jane English. What is firmly established cannot be uprooted. What is firmly grasped cannot slip away. It will be honored from generation to generation. Cultivate virtue in yourself, and virtue will be real. Cultivate it in the family, and virtue will abound. Cultivate it in the village, and virtue will grow. Cultivate it in the nation, and virtue will be abundant. Cultivate it in the universe, and virtue will be everywhere. Therefore, look at the body as body. Look at the family as family. Look at the village as village. Look at the nation as nation. Look at the universe as universe. How do I know the universe is like this? By looking. Isn't that Hillman's first virtue? And here is my poem from my father. My father followed the way, after Tao Te Ching number 54. My father followed the way, but he didn't know where he was going. He cultivated his virtues, but he didn't know what his virtues were. He knew his tomatoes, and when he cultivated his garden, he told his younger neighbor, "It's the soil. It's life and death and sex." He didn't have to know more than that. He followed the way of his garden, and he shared his abundant tomatoes with everyone, even the nuns and the priest. What about adulthood? In this conference, we're looking at the Iron John tale. This is a tale about entering adulthood, but it is also a tale about how to be an adult. The wild man guides the youth. Was he in the pond on purpose, in order to meet the boy in the messiness of life? Is he leading the boy to adulthood by allowing him to experience difficulties as they arrive? Good elders and mentors do that. Remember, conscientious child rearing, and mentoring will not abide egocentrism. These days I hear the Iron John story as an old man. Behind the story, we don't know what the wild man is doing, just as youth do not know what adults do in conscientious adult age. At my age, I have a darn good idea. In Iron John, the boy must learn to use his many types of awareness. Today, if we don't have a satisfying career, or we're not a celebrity, or succeeding materialistically, we are a failure in life. The push toward immediate gratification is growing logarithmically, whether from fear or other expectations, such as the zero-sum mentality. We know that at a deeper level, someone who learns delayed gratification, like the conscientious adult, has a happier, more satisfying life, and is also emotionally more resilient. When a man works within the experiential bounds of family, community, and his connectedness to all life, he gains interior growth, which benefits him and the outside world. One's existence as an adult is a complex relationship to the mess we know as life. Our indigenous neighbors and cultural elders say, all my relations. I'm suggesting that there is a spiritual dimension to the role of father, uncle, or brother, where a man knows that he has a balanced and beautiful awareness of his individual needs within familial, communal, cultural, and planetary needs. When I look back at my ancestors, I am connected to them biologically and psychically. My son is connected. My granddaughter and grandson are connected. Any great-great-grandchildren will be connected. And there is a spiritual dimension to those connections that our celebrity-infused culture is still refusing to celebrate. A man who is aware of his role and accountable for his actions will always grow spiritually. He becomes aware that he is a spiritual entity in a string of entities, and he is neither more important nor less than one of his ancestors or his descendants. His life is a node in the endless climbing vine of existence. At times, that vine is thrown downwards. At other times, it grows sunward. Sometimes it merely coils on the earth. Divinity is felt when an awareness of life, spiritual and sensual, permeates and flows through the web of his relationships. Just like the aware craftsman or master poet, a man can find a connection to the divine by consciously working at his role within his family, community, or tribal entity. Indigenous people across the globe knew this long before Western European values began to dominate the social and commercial worlds. The flesh and blood of a man, the emotional energies inside of him, and his access to spiritual mysteries depend upon his awareness at all the levels of his existence. Then he is aware of the interdependency of all living things, and things that once lived and those that will live. I would like to end with a poem by the Canadian Alden Nolan, whom I believe to have been a true aristocrat. Great things have happened by Alden Nolan. We were talking about the great things that have happened in our lifetimes. And I said, oh, I suppose the moon landing was the greatest thing that happened in my time. But of course, we were all lying. The truth is, the moon landing didn't mean 1/10 as much to me as one night in 1963, when we lived in a 3-room flat in what once had been the mansion of some Victorian merchant prince. Our kitchen had been a clothes closet, I'm sure, on a street where by now nobody lived who could afford to live anywhere else. That night, the 3 of us, Claudine, Johnny, and me, woke up at 4:30 in the morning and ate cinnamon toast together. Is that all? I hear somebody ask. Oh, but we were silly with happiness. And under our windows, the street cleaners were working their machines and conversing in Italian, and everything was strange without being threatening. Even the tea kettle whistled differently than in the daytime. It was like the feeling you get sometimes in a country you never visited before, when the bread doesn't taste quite the same. The butter is a small adventure, and they put paprika on the table instead of pepper. Except that there was nobody in this country except the 3 of us, half tipsy with the wonder of being alive and wholly enveloped in love. Thank you.